The Athletic put out an anonymous player survey. Who is the most overrated player, underrated player, and who has the most punchable face in the NHL?
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, February 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at MondoMan12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your best bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Cats fans, I hope that you guys have had an incredible All-Star break and the time away from watching the game, that you guys were able to enjoy yourselves in whatever hobbies you might have outside of watching the sport of hockey. And we are back in full force here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast after taking a few days off. If you notice on the January feeds of the podcast, we had bonus episodes and Saturday episodes in order to front load all the content. It's like front loading a contract, but in this case, as far as podcasts. But it is a Friday, which means it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Nich Fairbanks is back here on the show. And Nich, welcome back to the show, and great to see you, my friend.
Great to see you as well. Glad to, come back here. And Florida is won 8 straight on the road and looking towards the second half. But I believe we had some news that came out today that we should talk about.
Yes, some news that we will definitely will talk about as far as the show. And also, one thing that is a big conversation point the last few days as far as just All-Star break content and just discussing when it comes to superlatives amongst peers in the NHL is the Athletics anonymous player survey. And there are most overrated, underrated, best goalies, you name it. But the one that I want to start this one off with a bang by discussing the player whose face you want to punch the most. And
who's that?
I wonder who that might be. But the players, anonymous, have voted Nick Cousins as the player that they would like, whose face they would like to punch the most in the NHL. Coming, and I'm scrolling down as I'm talking. Sorry about that, guys. And he comes in at 28.57% of the votes out of 147 here, and Brad Marchand came in second. Matthew Tkachuk actually came in third. Other Florida Panthers who are on the list are Ryan Lomberg and former Panther Radko Gudas is on this one as well, who Radko Gudas just passed his total PIM from last year already this season with the Anaheim Ducks. But I'm not here to defend whether it's deserved or not for Nick Cousins. Does have a reputation as far as getting into it with guys after the whistle and all. But I think this has more to do with not only what's happened recently with Valimaki, Zucker, and even before Gudbranson, but also how powerful a platform like Hockey Night in Canada is when Kevin Bieksa decided to go on that little rant about calling Nick Cousins a rat on the ice as well. So I think that's also something that stood out to me, that maybe had a little bit of an influence in this vote?
Well, that's like calling the kettle black, in my opinion. I know Beck actually got away with a couple things when he was in the league, but he's retired now. He's got a good platform, and he's able to use it, effectively. And this is recency bias. Nick
Yes.
Cousins, he's always been kind of that guy that'll get under your skin, but I don't think of ever of a time where I would think of him as being the most punchable face in the NHL. That was always for Brad Marchand or somebody else. And I know he was on that list, but I just think that he's an easy target right now. Not only with the hits that have happened. I mean, I know Good Branson was, borderline. Was it Salamaki or Valimaki?
Valimaki.
Valimaki. He even pulled up. Yeah, he even pulled up and tried not to hit him. And then, we're not talking about Zucker's hit after that. It's all because Cousins, So my big thing is that this will blow over. Cousins will eventually get back into the lineup. And as I tweeted, that he's going to be a guy that you're going to want for the playoffs. And he will be there. What line he's going to play on, I can't tell you, but he's definitely somebody you want. And, I will say this might be somebody that Florida might miss if he's not on the team, going forward. I know his play is replaceable right now as far as like scoring goals, putting up points, but he just gives you that little dimension that you're going to need going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and just being, and also the fact that you bring him in for as far as a short-term contract as well, mixing it up with characters and the winning too. Would this much attention be on Nick Cousins if he were on a team that lost a lot of games? I can't put a finger necessarily on whether it'll be that or not when it comes to how players would feel about him. But the fact that the Panthers, let's also not forget, they have a target on their back as far as being the Eastern Conference champions just this past season as well. So that has a lot to do with it as well. So it's a big it was something that really stuck out as far as that when it came to when it came to that. So and there are more categories as far as the anonymous player survey as far as most overrated and underrated as far as that. And Matthew Tkachuk was on the overrated list as well. And this goes back to the whole recency bias for when it comes to Tkachuk. I mean, 2 straight 100-point seasons as well for Tkachuk. And then he, struggles out of the gate, only 5, at least offensively. 5 goals throughout the first 36, but then you see how he doubled that in the month of January as well. And this just doesn't make too much sense for me. As far as guys up there, Trevor Zegras, Darnell Nurse is up there. I mean, we think about the Michigan when it comes to Trevor Zegras. Now he's in trade rumors as well. Darnell Nurse, the high salary that he has, and then playing on a team with Connor McDavid, and then being relied as that number 1 defenseman as well. I don't know why Jason Robertson is up here. This one I don't quite get. You know who's up here though? Is Jonathan Huberdeau. And I could see overrated as far as what he's getting paid, and I can understand. I could understand now as far as the overrated label. Last year, it's like you wanted him to be a little patient when it came to new environment, coaching staff, but now there's enough of a sample size as well. Another one here is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, a former number 1 overall pick who doesn't play up to the level of McDavid and Draisaitl, so I can understand that one as well. And Pierre-Luc Dubois, who it's trouble in LA right now for the Kings, and he's I know plus minus isn't the be all end all, but there's a 30-point difference between him and the top plus minus guy on the LA Kings, so that can justify. As far as Tkachuk, as far as being overrated, as far as this player survey, what are your thoughts here?
Without being able to say a few words on here, because I know everybody listens, that is absolute BS. Just because, when I was reading the article, they said that he's overrated and that people took him so seriously last year during the playoffs that, he's still overrated, that he was like put in the top 10 of players when he shouldn't be in the top 10 of players. Let me remind everybody how, like, what he did last offseason or last postseason, willed them to win against the Boston Bruins, bodied the Toronto Maple Leafs single-handedly. Well, I shouldn't say single-handedly, but was a two-headed monster between him and Bobrovsky that took out the Carolina Hurricanes. He got 3 winners in that series, and then basically broke his sternum, came back that
And still
same
played.
game, played, and scored the game-tying goal to get the series to 2-1. So the fact that they're going to call him overrated sounds like jealousy to me.
Yep. And the fact that he has that flair is as well, and the whole Tkachuk family as well, the reputation that comes with that. And Brady Tkachuk is also as far as punchable faces, he's on there as well. He's not on there as far. He's not on there as far as overrated as far as Brady, but he is up there as far as punchable faces as well.
Yep.
So it's just, when you think about it in that, you think, hey, look what he did just last postseason. I mean, I just don't understand that as far as that. But we're gonna go ahead.
I was gonna add one more thing. Tell me another player outside of McDavid or McKinnon right now that can go to another franchise and turn around exactly what that franchise is going through and making them a viable market. Matthew Tkachuk is the only other one, in my opinion.
I could maybe argue Artemi Panarin. Maybe.
Okay. I'll add Austin Matthews too, maybe. Yeah. But there's only so many of those individuals that can actually move and would be able to do that. Now, not everybody could, and I think that's where people kind of miss, that part of things where, maybe he's not overrated, maybe he's actually not. Maybe he's underrated.
Maybe. Just maybe, but we're going to transition over to segment number 2. We're going to discuss more of underrated, as far as this is just a conversation that is just tiresome, and we'll break that down more in segment number 2. We're going to discuss that here on a Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many different ways for you to end the season with a dub, or 2, or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which player will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 or more wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. Locked On Sports Today has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Back on this Friday, February 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday edition of the show. So, Nick, when you think about, go back and look at this player survey, when you look at underrated, the most underrated player in the NHL, and this is a conversation that we've been talking about for years, and everybody talking about Aleksander Barkov being the most underrated player in the NHL. Sam Reinhart is actually number 2, which I can understand. Sam Reinhart, he played on a Buffalo. He was a 20-goal scorer for many years there, and did not sniff the playoffs at all while there.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand that now that he's exploding for a 65 goal pace right now. Crazy to believe. But Barkov, this conversation is so tiresome when it comes to him and the underrated label, because in that same survey, when it talks about the best player in the league, Barkov comes out at number 8. So when it comes to, if he's number 8 on the best player, on as far as best players in the league as voted by the players, and then underrated, is he really underrated after all? I mean, especially when he has hardware to his name too, with the Selke and being spoken about as far as the favorite this year too. So I feel like it should just be changed as far as the most underappreciated player in the NHL, not the most underrated as far as that. And you think about him, what he means to a team. He's either whatever you define as best player, it's either 1 or 2, however you define it. Mm-hmm. When you look at this list, you look at someone like Mikko Rantanen, who's maybe the 3rd or 4th, which is on most teams, that's the best player. Most teams. Yeah. Braden Point, same thing. 2nd, 3rd or 4th option as far as best player when it comes to that. He's the best player if you put him on another team as well. Barkov, in the top 95 percentile, he'll be the best or 2nd best on every single team too. And this is just, it's a tiresome conversation.
I think underappreciated is probably the best way to put it. How many times do you have to say a guy is underrated and continues to just show his leadership, his style of play, and his commitment, not only to the organization, but to his team? I can't think right now of a better representation of the team right now than Barkov. I mean, the team goes as he goes. Mm-hmm. The team loses a lot when he's out of the lineup, even though they were able to scratch some wins off. And that's fueled because of Reinhart's hot play this year and also Tkachuk finally waking up. But you can just tell that there is something huge missing from the team when he's off and he's not playing. Now, what I will say is the one thing that I know other Panthers fans have been waiting for, and I'm pretty sure other players have probably noticed this as well. We are still waiting for that defining moment when he actually takes over a game, like a McKinnon or a McDavid. That just, he is a madman. He takes it over, and there's nothing that can stop him. Now, what I will say is, Tkachuk has kind of shown us that a little bit since he's been a Panther. Okay, he's had that extra gear. Mm-hmm. Barkov, to me, I don't know if he does. I think he's just even keeled no matter what. He's got to be that cerebral player that's always on the ice, that always exudes confidence, and that is always going to get a job done. But he's not going to be the guy that's just going to take over everything. And I think that's part of the reason why he's probably never going to be outside of that underrated list, just because he doesn't have that pop.
And because he just doesn't talk a lot too. That's just another thing. Personality has a lot to do with it. And listen, I mean, as much as Sam Bennett has stepped up his game, especially on the power play, is when Barkov was gone. I mean, when you think about battles and the ability to quickly get the puck off your tape down low to try that set play to Reinhart in the slot, but then prior to getting it down to Matthew Tkachuk, it's something missing when it comes to battles on the half wall as well. When it comes to that, and just I mean, size has a lot to do with that, which Barkov is bigger than Bennett, so that's also so valuable that we just don't really talk about when it comes to how he's just such a difference maker as well for that. But before we move on, best goalie in the league, as far as that, this is, and I feel like these are more like reputation type of votes when it comes to that, because Vasilevsky hasn't played the whole season. He has an .899 save percentage right now. So, but we know he can turn it on at any moment. Connor Hellebuyck is up there, deserved.
Yeah.
But then you see Marc-Andre Fleury on here, 2.73% of the votes, which is very confusing. And then you have Sergei Bobrovsky is not even in here as well. There's the other category here, but it's the 3.83% of guys who just got one vote out of 183 here. So it's like when you think about the run that he had and the fact that he's following it up, I just find myself so confused why he's not even. I'm not saying he's better than Sorokin. I'm not saying he's better than Shesterkin. Hell, I'm not even saying he's better than Swayman as well. But not even a top 10 as far as best goalie in the league.
I think I don't want to say it's recency, but I think Bob has had it tough here in Florida. He's the last 2 seasons he's been able to show up and earn the contract, and that's going to be the biggest anchor. And we talk about that all the time, but he's finally living up to it. And I think that probably has something to do with it. You get paid that money, you're expected to come here and do a job. And for the first 3-4 years, yeah, it's been hell. So now when you actually do what you're expected to do and you excel, people are still waiting for the other foot to drop. You know what I mean? They don't want to give you credit for what you're doing or what you have done. They're just saying, just give him a little bit of time. He's going to fall off and he's going to be the Bobrovsky we've known for the last 4 seasons. But Vasilevsky, as you said, is probably more or less on reputation because he is that guy. They won 2 cups. We're in 3 Stanley Cups in 3 years straight. Guy's a gamer, but not showing it this season. I mean, I understand he's coming off of a major back surgery, which for goalies, you don't know how they're going to come back from it. But Marc-Andre Fleury, he's loved wherever he's gone. And again, I think that's a reputation thing. Now, would you want him as a backup goalie to Bob or starting over Bob? I don't know. I think Stolarz has come in and done a pretty good job. And I'd be wary of, the team and how they would feel around Marc-Andre. I mean, again, lovable guy, but you can just tell that Father Time is starting to catch up.
Yeah, for sure. And again, reputation when it comes to Marc-Andre Fleury, as much of a legend he is, and hopefully it's not the last ride for him as well, as he still has not announced his plans after the season, even though when the Wild went to Quebec, a bunch of his family was at that game. So we'll see as far as that. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss one more thing on this survey and discuss more about the All-Star game, not necessarily previewing it, but just some frustrations and how, if we have hope that it could be fixed. We're going to discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Segment number 3 here on this Friday, February 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday, here with Nich Fairbanks for another edition of Fairbanks Friday. And Nick, as far as the survey, 182 votes on favorite road city to play in. The city of Sunrise came in 6th here behind Vancouver, Nashville, Montreal, New York, and Vegas. I've never gone to Vegas, Montreal, Nashville, or Vancouver, but I can tell you all about New York and all. Obviously, great city to be in, lots of things to do. Vegas, going to go to gamble and all that stuff, cool. As touristy as can be. But they said the city. I think it's more about the region, the weather, the beach, the taxes. You know it. So 6 months out of the year, these players spent in the cold up north. Definitely an advantage here as far as that for the city of Sunrise to have 5.46% of the votes. So that there's that as far as that. Worst one, Winnipeg. So
I wonder
and
why.
not only snow, but maybe no airport there as well, as that's the consistent conversation there in that city as well. In Ottawa, their arena not being in the city, but it's funny because Florida's arena is kind of in the middle of nowhere, but the fact that weather, that's the big factor here when it comes to Road City. Last thing I want to talk about as far as the All-Star game. So Sergei Bobrovsky and Sam Reinhart will be on Team McDavid, along with honorary captain Will Arnett, which love Will Arnett in the show BoJack Horseman, which not safe for work. If you guys do have children, for those
NSFW
listening.
guys.
Yes, yep. NSFW, but big fan of Will Arnett, and I will admit I didn't know who Tate McRae was until right before the announcement. I even looked up her music, didn't know a single song, but obviously Bieber, Michael Bublé, definitely well-known guys. But my biggest issue on the All-Star draft is the fact that you don't have an opportunity for most of these guys, especially Team Bieber, that all the teammates are together and that you don't have an opportunity to face one another and to smack talk here, which is something that I kind of like as far as that. And the first thing I think of when it comes to this is the necessary push to have more international competition as well, at least in my opinion, because I would love to see, I know we're going to get some type of international competition next year, but only 4 teams: USA, Canada, Finland, Sweden. I would love to see Matthew Tkachuk versus Aleksander Barkov in the future. But the fact that we're having 4 Maple Leafs together, multiple Canucks together, with the exception of Lindholm, who just got traded there, I think I just think this just makes the event like not as fun as it should be. And the draft was little cringe. Even Nathan McKinnon spoke about it after. There was a commercial, at least in the beginning, after every round, which is like, man, can we just get this over with as well? And I want to ask you, is there a way to fix this?
So one thing that I think the league has actually done pretty well with is the different things that they allow the players to do, for the All-Star game. Florida did, like shooting pucks on the beach, things like that, dunking your teammate in the pool. Vegas, where you played a bunch of games around the city and casinos and stuff like that, which I thought was pretty, cool. But you're not really changing anything to do with the All-Star game. I mean, to be honest, the skills competitions are okay, but they're cringe as well. And the game itself, I mean, when I was there live last year, I thought it was pretty entertaining, but that's live. I didn't see it on TV. My thing is, when I most enjoyed the NHL All-Star game was back when they did North America against the world. You had the greatest from North America versus everybody else. And you know what? It was pretty damn close. You had the best of the best in the world going at each other. And, I have to say this, Pavel Bure was the best player. I'm just going to say that out of, straight out of my heart about that one. But no, it seemed like the competition was up there. I mean, the guys weren't taking it too seriously, but you could tell that there was something a little bit more there. Here, you can tell guys just don't want to be there. They want to go home. So you have to incentivize it. And, I think the way that they're trying to do it now is money. Okay. But you're taking away a lot of these guys' plans that they were planning on going on a vacation to a nice area to go to Toronto. I mean, something's got to happen. You either have to bring in another firm to help kind of like galvanize and understand, what they could do to make the game fun, or, make it tied to, what baseball does as far as like the World Series. Whoever wins that game has some kind of home field advantage or something.
Which they don't do anymore.
Exactly. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just to change it up, make it worth something. The other thing too that I think that they could possibly do is, make the players go. I mean, I know there's a couple of years ago where Ovechkin said, no, I don't want to go. And they basically suspended him. The game is like, dude, it's not for you 100%. It's for the fans. So again, just getting everybody to buy in and wanting to participate, I think is the biggest thing. And in order to do that, you got to bring people in who know what they're doing. And to be honest, I don't think the NHL does. And it shows in their ratings and it shows in the amount of money that they bring in.
Yeah, and Alexander Ovechkin doesn't have to worry about skipping this one as he is as he is enjoying his vacation in Dubai, where he actually ran into Wayne Rooney, soccer star Wayne Rooney there. So saw that earlier as far as that. But then you'll have your regular stuff as an accuracy shooting, hardest shot, fastest skater, which we know McDavid is definitely going to be there. He's going to be there every year. As far as that. And honestly, I'll tell you the truth. I don't even remember who won some of the events last year. And I was there in person as far as that. I think Brock Nelson won the accuracy shooting, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the only thing I remember. And I think it was Cale Makar that slipped. Someone slipped.
Yes.
During the fastest skater. I think it was Cale Makar. Those are the few things I remember. But obviously, there's a difference between when it's in your region versus when it's not. And that's probably the all-star game that I'll probably care about the most for the rest of my life until it comes back to South Florida. But hey, I'm still going to watch it, obviously. And there's no Panthers in the skills competition on Friday. And
thankfully.
So I could watch it at ease on Friday and just, maybe cringe a little bit, but not cringe to the point where it's like, okay, what did the Panthers, what did the Panthers players do as far as this? So, hey, we're and as far as the game, hopefully, and we wish one thing and one thing the most here, that no one gets hurt. That is the number one important thing here, because the players are definitely hoping. When you watch the actual game on Saturday, you'll see that they're just trying not to get hurt. But Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where we discuss the player survey and more about the All-Star game. Any last words before we sign off for the night, my friend?
Not much. Just enjoy the time off and everything. I know it's hard, because we don't have any Panthers hockey to really talk about. But the second half's about to start, guys, and let's get ready. Let's get in good form. Let's get in let's get in good shape for the playoffs. And Armando, I will see you next week.
I will see you next week as well, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steve Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.